Welcome. Welcome, Dr. Faye. Welcome to the Go Hard Chick podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here.
I'm
Looking forward to this discussion.
Yes, I'm excited about this conversation. You know, I just want the listeners to understand when you and I first spoke, because you're a licensed marriage and family therapist, a psychotherapist, and so when we were kind of talking about like ideas that we would chat about today, you mentioned something that's really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
You shared something that was really important to me, um, and to many of the women, and it's something that's happening to us. And I was like, absolutely, we're going to talk about this today. We're going to get into not only autoimmune disease, but just the stress that women of color in particular that we're dealing with, how it
Mm-hmm.
can manifest into disease. Yeah, all of that. I mean, just sharing our journeys just as a way to I think sharing is important. I know everybody doesn't feel comfortable, but I think the more that we talk about that, the more that we can help each other. So anywho, I'm going to stop babbling. Cuz I want you to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Wow. Well, I am known by my clients and patients and students as Dr. Faye. My name is Dr. Faye Weems Singleton. Um, and I would say I am affectionately known as Mama to my two adult children who are 41 and 43. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, as you stated, and I work primarily with individuals, couples, families, and I've had, and I call it the sacred opportunity to learn and explore how to be with polyamorous families, polygamous families. I work with persons of all ethnic, racial, spiritual, um, backgrounds, and I'm also a professor at a seminary. That seminary happens to be in the heart of the AUC, Atlanta University Center, right in between Morris Brown and Clark University. And I teach courses in pastoral care and pastoral counseling. So I am not only a licensed therapist, but I am a pastoral counselor. And so I work a lot with persons who are dealing with anxiety, depression, sexual trauma, identity crisis, development, and spiritual crisis. That's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Wow, wow. So very busy woman, very similar to a lot of the listeners of this podcast. We are moms, we are business women, uh, we are everything.
Yeah,
We are the go hard chicks,
yeah,
but we're also super stressed out.
yeah, yeah. Um, in my describing who I am, I would want for those who are listening to understand that it has been a long, difficult journey of determining how to balance life and how to better take care of myself. And in that journey, so many things have occurred in my life because of me not knowing how to take care of myself. And I say that this is the best quarter of my life. I
Mm.
will be 67 in September. And I did not start this journey in terms of becoming a therapist until the third quarter of my life. And it was my learning what was happening to me and my body that took me on this journey. And I say this to all of those who are listening. We come into this earth with several purposes. Sometimes we think we just got this one purpose, this one passion. And I learned that in this part of my life, there was a new purpose and passion, and that was not only to take care of me, but to model for my children and those in my community how to better take care of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that journey of learning that, like, is there anything you want to share? Like, what brought you to that point? Like, for me, in 2020, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and I was already cooking with this idea of the podcast. Um, but when that hit me, that's when I realized there is so much more as women that we need to know.
Mhm.
I thought I knew I had a general knowledge of diseases, but you know, and how best to take care of myself. And I learned I didn't know as much as I thought I knew.
Yeah.
Um, and so that took me on this journey, not only to heal, but to try to help inform other women. Um, because I can see it around me. I see it in my colleagues. I see it in other women. Like once you go through it, you know that look, you know? And we kind of, we just keep pushing. We keep working.
Mhm.
We keep
Mhm. Mhm.
not taking care of ourselves. We'll get to it later. And we are really suffering.
We are suffering tremendously, and we're suffering under that myth of the strong Black woman.
Hmm.
And I want to share with you the journey, but I want to introduce one of my favorite authors who is also a practitioner and educator. Her name is Shanika Walker Barnes, Dr. Barnes, Walker Barnes. And she wrote the book, Too Heavy a Yoke, A
Hmm.
Black Woman's Burden of Strength. And I refer to it in my course and I refer to it with my clients to talk about the fact that the uh, idea of our being strong Black women was imposed upon us. And that starts from when we were enslaved and how it's been passed down. And so, as a consequence, we regulate our emotions in ways that suppress them because we feel that we've got to be strong. We feel that to not demonstrate strength is weakness as opposed to learning balance. We have problems being able to emote and cry. We have problems thinking that, crying also demonstrates weakness as well as feeling that we have to be independent. And I introduced that to say that challenges started for me young in my early 20s because when I talk about enslavement, I'm talking about generations of believing that we as Black women have to be strong. We were
Hmm.
the ones who were given the same amount of work in the slave fields as the men. We would have our babies and we would still have to work. And so we learned how to pass that on from one generation, how to be strong in order just to survive. And so I saw my mother working these jobs, my grandmother working these jobs, and uh, doing more than one thing, and always having these stoic ways of presenting themselves. Although my parents were very tactile and touchy, but they were still very stoic about work. We've got to be strong. That was
Hmm.
all I heard. So by the time that I got married and had children, that's all I knew.
Yeah.
And what I did was I was having my baby at the same time that I was studying for my master's comprehensive exam. As soon as I had her, I went straight back to work. I was, our church was a large church, so I was singing in the choir 3 times on Sunday morning. I was running 5 a.m. prayer. I was doing Bible study for the young adults. I was working outside of that in terms of a full-time job, taking my children to all. I was just doing it all. And I felt good about it. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. little did I know how stressed out I was, how worn out I was. And so this is personal and I'm going to share it. I did not know at the time that my spouse was having an affair.
Mm.
And when that was brought to me, I've got to be strong, got to keep the family together, those toxic theological beliefs. And at night, I did not know that I was gritting my teeth.
We
It,
share that in common.
it took me opening my mouth to eat a sandwich one day and my jaw locked open.
Mm.
So when we're talking about the 1980s, unfortunately, they had not done a lot of work on temporal mandibular joint. And so I was almost like the testing baby. And so the orthodontic doctor forced my jaw shut. It ripped a tendon in my right jaw,
Mm.
which began the process of me having 3 brain operations and 3 jaw surgeries.
Oh my goodness.
But prior to all of that, I want to say that I want the audience to hear the gritting of the teeth is internalized stress.
Mhm.
It is our brain's way of trying to process the subconscious emotions that we've suppressed. And so I had no idea that I was trying to work out all these schedules and how I was going to deal with the infidelity of the relationship and whether or not God was going to be mad with me if I got a divorce.
Mhm.
I was trying to work all of that out at night. And so it was at the end of the 6th surgery when I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to be better. That's when I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis
Mm.
and found out that not only did I have scarring on my lungs, but I had it in my skin, I had granulomas that were just growing on my face, my arms, my legs, and I have it in my eyes. And that's why you see me wiping my eyes quite a bit. That's the one part that we're still working on. So I'm going to pause for a minute and say that's how I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis.
When were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed in 2004.
Okay. So that was kind of still early. I guess we weren't the awareness about autoimmune disease and all of that, it wasn't
Mhm.
quite where we are today.
Nowhere near
Okay.
where we are today. And I would still say that today we're so far behind because sarcoidosis impacts predominantly African American women. So, of course, there's not the kind of research that would really help us. And so, then and even now, what they load you up with are steroids.
Yes.
And, too many steroids cause so many other problems. Um, my cousin, who died of a heart attack, died as a consequence of all of the steroids because she had both sarcoidosis and lupus. And we
Mm.
understand that lupus and sarcoid are very related. And it's even hard to distinguish when they're trying to diagnose. Sarcoidosis is one of the most difficult autoimmune diseases to diagnose.
Yes.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned the locking of your jaw. I myself, I grind my teeth at night. I mean,
Hmm.
this started
Hmm.
I probably 20 years ago. I knew it was stress or related to that, but I didn't really fully understand. I mean, of course, when I would go to my dentist, he wasn't pleased by
Yeah.
the damage that he was seeing. So I have to wear a night guard. But I didn't understand, like that was a sign then, but I didn't understand the full impact. And it that was probably in one of the initial signs. Then I suffered with anxiety around that same time. Then, the autoimmune disease. It just was this progression that if you don't recognize it and try to take action, from what I understand, once you get one autoimmune disease, it's highly likely you can get another.
You are vulnerable because now the immune system has been suppressed, because that's what autoimmune diseases are, is a
Hmm.
suppression of our immune system, which makes us vulnerable to other diseases. But when you talk about the gritting of the teeth, I don't think that um, many of us understand how important it is to get that checked out
Right.
and to follow through about it, because of this burden of strength, this myth of strength. Well, oh wow, I'm just gritting my teeth. But you know what your dentist said to you about how you were wearing down your teeth. It is amazing. And I ask my students and clients, think about this. If you're gritting your teeth so hard that you're grinding down the enamel in your mouth, what does that say about the stress that is
Right.
occurring in our bodies? And I think one of the things we don't recognize is that this body is magnificent. It was created as a system of information, and we don't pay attention to the information it's trying to provide. So if we're gritting our teeth like that, that's information that there's something I'm holding on to. There's something that needs to be addressed. There's something I need to work through. So yes, go to the dentist, get the mouth guard, but then that's time to find a licensed, safe, sacred space to start
Right.
figuring out what is it that I'm
You
not
got it. Right.
addressing and dealing with.
And that is the key right there. Like so many of us, including myself, I got the guard, but I didn't do anything else.
Yeah,
Uh, I just kept just wearing a guard, and when I would wear the guard down, I get another. I just wasn't making the connection that I needed to go deeper. I needed to get to the root of it, if
mhm,
you will. I wasn't doing that. Now, by the time I got my autoimmune disease diagnosis, I was more aware. Um, and I remember that the endocrinologist telling me, I remember asking him, "What can I do?"
mhm,
And he told me nothing. He said, "Eventually, your thyroid will burn out and we'll just remove it." Just, said it
mhm,
very casually.
mhm.
And I remember leaving there thinking, this man is crazy if he
Yeah,
thinks that I'm just going to sit here and let my thyroid burn out.
yeah,
And so then I just got on this mission to try to figure out. I just wouldn't accept that there was nothing I
yeah.
could do.
And that's why we have to be so responsible for our own bodies. And especially as African American women, we are not really considered fully human.
No.
We have been dehumanized, and we know that there have been studies that demonstrate that even there are doctors who believe that we can bear more pain than others,
Hmm.
that we don't experience and feel pain the same. And so, just as your doctor told you, I up until last September 2023, for 8 years, because I got off the steroids, I was injecting myself once a week with a shot, methotrexate. Methotrexate used to be used early on for cancer, so it's like a low dosage of that. So for 8 years, I was doing that, and every time I would go in and I would ask the doctor, "Am I going to have to do this? How long am I going to have to do this?" And they would say, "Well, I think you need to just get settled in the fact that you're going to have to do this for the rest of your life."
Hmm.
It was not until the death of my parents. My mother died 2 years ago, and then my dad died a year after, which was last year, this time, on the same day, 1 year afterwards.
Hmm.
And I am introducing that because when we think of stress, we think of all the things that I mentioned, but we're not thinking about how grief adds
Yes.
stress to the body and impairs the body. And so even though I was on that shot of methotrexate, I was considered in remission because
Hmm.
the granulomas had gone. I was no longer on a breathing machine. I forgot to mention I was on oxygen for 3 years between 2004 and 2006. Um, but when my mother died, and I am an only child, I immediately put all my energy and effort into my dad. Now,
Hmm.
I'm a therapist and I know how important it is to grieve. So I'm sitting with a therapist and I'm trying my best to make sure that I'm processing it. And she kept warning me, you're not allowing yourself to process your
Hmm.
mom's death. And you put all your energy and effort into your dad. You're flying home every other month, to see him. So when he died, it was as if both parents had finally
Hmm.
died. And I came out of remission. I woke up right 2 days after I buried my dad. I woke up and could not breathe.
Mm.
And when I called my daughter, uh, because I told her I was not happy with the doctors here, the doctors here were saying, we're going to have to put you back on steroids. And they just went through all this. So I cannot go back to that space. There has to be something different. And she was able to get me in with a person who was more naturopathic oriented, who helped me to recognize not only was I going to have to go back to eating differently,
Yes.
uh, doing different things. But he said, you're a therapist. You know that if you eat better, but you aren't dealing with the emotions,
Yes.
nothing's going to change.
Right. Right.
And so I am medication free over the last 9 months because I started tackling not just the foods and the supplements, but the grief.
Right. Right. Goodness. Yeah, I got a couple things I want to touch on. I take notes during these and I wrote some notes
Right,
and I
right.
so I'm so excited. Like you mentioned, like we as women, we do it all. And you mentioned right before your diagnosis being like proud of that. And that is the danger. Like we applaud being able to do everything.
Mhm, mhm,
I'm the
mhm,
mom, I'm the boss,
mhm.
babe. I'm uh like I mentioned on another podcast, uh, there was a commercial. It was some this is when I was a kid. I think it was in the 80s. Some sort of perfume. I can't remember. But it was a song. It was like, she can bring home the bacon, put it
Yeah,
up in
I remember that.
yeah. And I remember looking at that commercial as a kid and thinking, women, we can do everything.
Yeah,
And my father died when I was very young. And so I watched her raise three kids, single mom, and she did do everything. She cooked dinner, she worked, if she cut the lawn,
yeah,
if, I knew the difference between a flathead and a Phillips screwdriver because of her, because she would fix things around the house. And so I am that person, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
but I didn't know. I just thought that's what we as women are supposed to do.
Mhm, mhm,
And we're not,
mhm,
you don't need to ask for help.
mhm.
Just suck it up.
Yeah.
And so now, even though I'm more aware now and I see myself when I'm going there, and like I had a recent struggle where I fell out of remission. Um, how One thing I'm struggling with is how do we prepare for the hits when they come? We know that things are going to happen. People, for example, and I'm so sorry about your parents.
Thank you.
That's We know that death of loved ones is inevitable and that's going to come. So how do we prepare ourselves
Mm.
if I don't even know if we can, so that when those hits come that we don't necessarily go back into remission or that I don't know. or fall out of remission, I should say?
That's a great question because I don't believe, first of all, there is no way to prepare for grief. There's no
Right.
way to prepare for death. Um, and when you talk about the hits of life, we don't know what those hits look like. They come in all shapes and forms. So I think what's most important for us is to have those kinds of reminders that help us to know that when the hit comes, to pay attention to our body, to remember our body is an information system, and that our bodies tell us, you're not handling this well,
Mhm.
you're not processing this, and then move forward with what we need to do based on our knowledge of, okay, so I am waking up and my heartbeat is rapid every morning. What am I thinking about when I go to bed? What what am I thinking about all day? We have to be so careful about the conversation we're having with ourselves about ourselves,
Mhm.
and to be able to pay attention to that and know, okay, what is it that I'm saying to myself that could be causing the anxiousness? Oh, wow, I haven't slept in the last few nights. What's going on? I'm not eating like, or I'm eating too much. Use that information to let us know, oh, there's something going on. Let me
Mhm.
get with someone to help process this and see if I can come up with some new tools. Or you may have the tools, but you still need community, someone
Mhm.
to help us. I think that's the key.
Okay.
We live in a space now where we push so much individuality. We don't recognize that we were created as relational beings. And the way that we prosper, the way that we heal, the way that we feel good is in relation. But there are those who are listening will say, but I just don't like being around people. I'm
Yes.
an introvert.
Yes.
Well, that's okay. It's just that there's certain parts of life that will remind us of we are relational beings and we need to be in community in order for certain things to happen, and still resort back to being an introvert.
Right.
I, when you were talking about my trail of tears, I would say all the things that I was doing and trying to stand in a space of, but I'm strong and being proud of it. Dr. Walker Barnes talks about, she uses this phrase that I love that describes us as Black women in particular, and that is, we associate strength with suffering. If
Mhm.
we are suffering, if we are doing all of these things and we're just really not feeling the greatest, but we believe that's strength, and she
Mhm.
calls that walking on broken feet.
Mm.
You know how we are as women. We will put on shoes that are hurting
Yes.
and still keep trying to push through. And there'll be something going on with our feet, but we just keep going. And she uses that to explain how we walk on broken feet. We're in pain, and sometimes we realize it, sometimes we don't, but we'll just keep going.
Yeah. Like so I hear what you're saying is awareness is something that's key. Um and being in community.
Hmm.
But for someone like me, like I can say I'm aware. I know, I mean, I have good nights where I, you know, don't grind my teeth, and then I have bad nights and I know something's going on, or I could feel just like the last couple weeks, for example, have been quite overwhelming.
Hmm.
And how I find myself, my daughter is 13, so she's not a baby anymore. She's old enough where she can do some things.
Yeah.
My partner's a grown man, he could do some things. I find myself saying, "Hey, help. Can y'all please do your dishes?" Like, well, wash your own clothes. Take a little of the burden off of me. Um, I don't always get that help, but I guess my question is, how do we women ask for help? How do we? Because there are times, obviously, I don't ask for help at all. I just kind of struggle through it.
Mhm.
But what are your thoughts on like getting help?
Mhm. That's a great question. I love the example you just provided because I'm going to work from there. Um, First of all, I use this thing called the feelings wheel, and the feelings that such as uh, anger, frustration, annoyance, sadness, uh, those are feelings that demonstrate that there is a need that we have. So that when we talk about awareness, and you're feeling that something's going on, not quite right. You're gritting your teeth at night and you look around, you start to recognize, I need assistance. I need help. We have to then articulate what it is that we need. And it can't be couched in this passive aggressive way of, I wish you all need to. It has to be stated emphatically. And this is a part of setting boundaries because when it comes to balancing our lives and getting our needs met, one of the things we've got to do is set very firm boundaries. And the problem with that is we've used that term so much and so loosely, we don't really understand what that means. There are 3 steps that are involved in boundaries, and that is you articulate what your need is. I need help. I need assistance in the kitchen. And because we know with teenagers and even partners sometimes, they need to hear specifically. So, what I need is for you all to wash the dishes, rinse them, dry them, put them in the cabinet, clean off the counter, sweep, clean the stove, be specific, and then state. If you all are not going to do that, these are the consequences. So you state what your need is and you give consequences. But the third step is the most critical, and that is follow through. If
Yeah.
you say that if you all do not clean the kitchen at least twice a week, I'm not cleaning it.
Hmm.
You can't go back and clean it. If
Yeah.
you talk to me in that manner, that is hurtful. I'm not going to tolerate that. And if you begin to talk like that, I'm going to just let you know I'm walking away because you have just said some things that are hurtful. You can't stay there and argue with the person. So when we talk about boundaries, we have to articulate what we need, state the consequences, and follow through. That is one way of beginning to address what is going on inside of us and alleviating a lot of the anxiety and stress and even maybe some depression
Yeah.
because we're now stating what we need. I didn't say we're always going to get what we need, but the more we're able to set firm boundaries, you're more likely to get what you need, but also know there's going to be pushback because people are not used to you setting boundaries.
Right.
And that has been very comfortable for them.
Right. And that is my challenge, and I know it's other women's challenge too, because I, as soon as you said you got to be specific, wash, dry, clean the counter, I my brain went, they know what to do. Why do I have to say all of that?
Yeah. And,
But
and that's one of the problems that we have is already making the assumption that they know. Maybe, but what's going on inside of them? Why are they processing information the way that they're processing it? And you're not going to really know that or figure it out, but just to be able to recognize they're not processing the way that I do, because my body, my thought process is different from theirs. So I've noticed that if I'm not specific, I'm not going to get anything done. So,
Yeah. But then you fall back into just doing it yourself. And I've tried to strike, Dr. Faye. I've tried, well, I'm not touching it, but I can't keep walking past those dishes.
yeah. So I offer to you to think about what is going on inside of you that you cannot stand in your power and your agency and say, I don't like the dirty dishes. I don't like the filth, but it is more important right now for me to get my needs met.
Yeah. 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 And like I was mentioning before we hit record, I read a recent article and the author titled it How Silent Being Silently Pissed Off is Fueling Autoimmune Diseases in
Yeah.
Women of Color. And I can say I have been silently pissed off, you know, about a multitude of things, but we're talking about this at the, home situation. I get silently pissed off. My
Mhm.
partner asked me today, I mentioned to him this morning that I was tired. And he said, "Well, why are you tired?" And I'm thinking I didn't say anything because I was silently pissed off.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking to myself, what do you mean, what am I tired from? Do you see everything that I do here every day?
No, he doesn't, probably. And what he sees, he has a different perception of it than you do.
Hmm.
And so that's why in relationships, we have to have conversations about what is important to us, what fuels us, what tires us, what causes pain for us. We have to have those conversations. And we can't start from a place of using the word you this, you that. We have to start from a place of I feel,
Yeah.
and letting that person know I am so saddened that I have to continually repeat. It hurts my heart, talking from that space. Um, but I think it's important for us to recognize that when we're suppressing our emotions and feelings, we're releasing certain chemicals into the body, especially when we talk about anger. And as African American women, we don't want the trope of angry Black woman, although we will resort to anger before we really state that we're hurting or that
Yes.
we're sad.
Yes.
Because to talk about sadness means we have to show vulnerability.
Right.
And instead of that, we will resort to anger. But when we're angry and we're not allowing ourselves to process it appropriately, we're releasing all kinds of uh, chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol, going into the body, overload, and that's stress on the body. And
Hmm.
there's research that lets us know that this overload of adrenaline can enlarge the heart, it can cause problems with the heart. It is released into other organs of the body, causing overload and stress, impairing and causing us to have an impaired immune system.
Hmm.
And so they're seeing now, we, how many um, women of other persuasions do you hear of with fibroids?
Next to none.
Yeah. Uh, all of the things that are occurring in our bodies because of stress, living in society, being seen as hypersexualized or dehumanized in so many different ways, and then just being looked at, uh, even in our homes, as we can handle it, we can do it because of the way in which we perpetuate that
Hmm.
myth. So we've got to be careful about what we are suppressing because it is impairing our health system.
Yeah. Now,
Migraines,
one thing.
I didn't mention it, but I suffered with migraines for years to the point where I have my medical records look ridiculous because I would be
Mhm.
in and out of the hospital. I'm not talking about going to the emergency room to just get a shot. No, I would be in the hospital for days with migraines. Started to recognize not only the foods that I was eating, but also, again, the internalized stress. So I am not advocating for us to be malicious. Uh, in fact, I'm always talking about using compassionate language, but I believe that compassionate language has to be provided with authority. We have to state what we need. We've got to do a better job for our own survival.
Right.
And you notice how the doctors talk, they don't care.
Right. I gotta work on that because I do hold in. I hold it in, but eventually it comes out. But it's like
Your
my
body
brother
has to
says,
come out.
I go nuclear. And nuclear crystal is not a good crystal, but the damage is already being done because I've held it in for how many ever days, weeks, months, and then it explodes.
Yeah. We are like a pressure cooker when we hold it in. I always say we weren't created to hold all that stuff here and in our
Hmm.
bodies.
Hmm.
And so at some point, it is going to come out. Either it's going to come out in the words that we use, either in our physical actions, or it's going to come out in disease. It's going to
Yeah.
come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess we need to start practicing how to get our needs met, which first starts with us being able to articulate. But I acknowledge, based on my clients and my students and even myself, it is not easy to state what it is we need because we all come from these different lived experiences and there's certain things going on inside of us. And so the first step, I think, may be what is this I'm feeling when I try to get my needs met and I decide, oh, no, no, I'm not going to say anything. I'll just wait. Am I anxious? Am I sad? What is the feeling? What is my body telling me? And if I get anxious about articulating my needs or there's whatever that feeling is, then that's what I need to explore with someone. Where did that come from?
Hmm.
What was my formative experience that caused me to feel I can't ask for what I need? Because that anxiousness is informing us of something. And it's not just about finding out where it came from, but it is with that knowledge, now you start to learn new tools to address that anxiety.
Okay. Because I feel like sometimes no one's going to listen. So
Yeah.
why say anything?
And where does that come from? No
Right.
one is going to listen.
And then I think I'm exhausted. I don't want to waste my breath saying anything because I'm
Yeah.
not going to do anything. And then I'm going to get even more angry.
Yeah. But do you hear what you do? You say, I'm going to get exhausted, but I'll go ahead and do it. But you're exhausted, but
Yeah.
you're going to go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Compounding the exhaustion. And then
Yeah.
we wonder why our head is hurting, our back is hurting, stomach, all these things are information that oh no, I can't hold this in anymore.
Yeah.
But I caution everyone always, anytime you start to make changes in your life, especially these positive changes, there's going to be resistance.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the challenge, not I mean, staying the course even though those around us don't necessarily like the changes.
What if the conversation you begin to have with yourself is, wow, they don't like these changes, so maybe I'm doing what I'm supposed to do to take care of myself.
Mhm.
Now I do need to be self-reflective about whether or not I'm going about it in a way that's compassionate, or if there's some ways in which I might need to kind of shape and mold this a little better.
Yeah.
But you may find, no, there are no changes needed. I'm just actually getting my needs met, and it's impacting them because they no longer are able to use me in that way.
Mhm.
And now they've got to develop their own tools and their own way of doing things. So you're
Right.
pushing them to have to do something different too.
I love that. I love that.
It's a journey. Doesn't
Yeah.
happen overnight.
Now let me ask you, because I'm curious. As a therapist, you probably just like I sat here and downloaded all of my household drama on you, and for that, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I wanna
please
make
don't
this a
apologize for that.
a
No.
personal therapy section. But you you probably hear a lot of these stories day in and day out. How do you take care of yourself? I
Mhm.
guess hearing what is that? Secondary trauma, if is that the right term?
Yeah,
How do you keep that from negatively affecting you?
that's a great question. Thank you for that, because I definitely would not want to leave without saying that it is not good for any therapist not to have a therapist,
Mm,
because we all have blind spots no matter how educated we are. And so we weren't created to love pain or like pain. And so it is good to have a safe space where the areas that we're not able to see that cause us pain or cause them trauma can be identified. We call it countertransference when we're in sessions with persons and they're triggering emotions in us. For instance, if someone's talking about infidelity, that triggers something in me. And
mm.
I have had to learn how to do what we call bracketing, putting my thoughts and my emotions to the side, or else I'll tell you exactly what I think you ought to do as opposed
Right.
to staying in a therapist mode. And then I take that, because anytime I'm triggered in a session, that's information for me. Oh, Faye, you need to get to your session. You need to find out what's going on, what you need to continue to work through. So, one, having a therapist is a way of processing. Two, I am very, very protective of my time. Uh, I, as we talked on the phone, I told you that Friday is I consider my Sabbath. This is not about a religious holiday. It's because Sabbath means rest. And
Mhm.
so on Fridays, I that's my rest day, and I choose what I want to do, but I'm not going to do anything that's strenuous. And so for me, doing this podcast, I felt was another way of externalizing thoughts and feelings. And so I didn't feel like this was going to be strenuous for me. But for the rest of the day, I've got several things that I've got planned that help me to relax uh, when my classes are in session, because I let them know first day, don't email me, don't text me, don't call me on Friday.
I love it.
My clients know that I am definitely always open to emergencies, but just to kind of text me, just don't, because I'm not going to respond until Saturday.
Mhm.
So one of the ways in which I really deal with, and we call it holding, trying to hold everyone's thoughts, feelings, and experiences is through my therapy, protecting my time, and being very careful about what I put into this temple. We think of it in ways that I'm not sure, but I've heard people say, my body is the temple of God. Yes, it is. So do you not recognize what you're putting in it when you eat? And
Mhm.
so I know that processed foods and processed sugar give me a quick high, but the fall is so deep. And
Yes.
so then I don't get a chance to really enjoy life because now I'm trying to recover from all the sugar in the Coke. I call myself a recovering sugar addict because oh my God. But I'm very careful about what I eat, how I eat, when I eat, what I, all of that. It makes a difference. And so when I sit with persons, I'm able to be present. And when they trigger me, I get to the space I need to be in.
Okay. That's wonderful. Yeah. I love that. I love that. It's just the importance of being aware and setting boundaries.
Yeah. The boundaries are so, so key. I have
Yeah.
great, great friends who it took them a while to get it. They would call either early Friday morning or sometimes during the day Friday. And even though they're friends of over 40 years, I had to not answer.
Yeah.
And then that next day, I said, "So I saw you call, and I want you to know that I purposely ignored it. You know I love you, but I need my rest. I need the emotional and physical rest, and I just couldn't pick up the phone. I'm
Oh,
sorry."
yeah. See, I don't have a day, but I probably need a day. But I just kind of go with my energy. Um I I've missed friends' events because if I woke up that day
Yeah.
and I felt like I needed rest, then I just didn't go. And I just told them later, like you said, it wasn't a good day for me.
Yeah. I offer to persons, especially with a busy schedule, that you continue to do what you're doing, but find a designated time, even if it's not an entire day, so that that happens to be your sacred time, your sacred space where you're loving on you, where you're
Mhm.
making you a priority. So it's not happenstance. It didn't happen that I woke up and I just didn't feel like it. But you're being intentional about setting aside time just for you.
Mhm.
And so there's some days on Friday, I may not get out of the bed until 1 or 2 o'clock. I'll just kind of lay there. I might read, I might watch TV or whatever. And then I'll say, "So, Faye, what do you want to do the rest of the day?"
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Well, Dr. Faye, thank you. Thank you so much. I love this conversation. Thank you for joining me. Please share with the listeners. Maybe they want to reach out to you. Maybe they want your services. Is there a way that folks can learn more about you or contact you?
Oh, definitely. I always offer, if you go to psychologytoday.com, and most people are not familiar, but I love psychologytoday.com because not only does it have my picture and a short bio on me, but it has everything about me in terms of who I care for, the modalities, my philosophy, all of that. And so when you go to psychologytoday.com, just put my name in and it will come up. Or you can reach me at fwsingleton at itc.edu.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Faye, because today is Friday, like you mentioned, and I want you to get back to your me time.
Oh, but thank you. This has been an honor and a pleasure. I take these opportunities as sacred. when we are able to share with others our experiences and hope that something I said could be helpful to others.
Oh, I'm absolutely positive. You shared some gems today, and I'm super thrilled to have this episode released to the listeners. I'm
Yeah.
sure they're going to get something
Oh,
special.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.